I shouldn't remember the sound of her voice this clearly. But I do. It was the kind of voice that carried instructions without trying, low, measured, always landing on the exact word that left no room for argument. The first time she said, "Be a good boy," it wasn't playful. It wasn't even flirtation. She said it like she was tired, like she'd spent too many years asking men to hold themselves together, and she didn't expect me to be any different. But I wasn't. Or maybe that's what I keep telling myself now. She was older than me by nearly half my lifetime. You could see it in the way she didn't rush, not with her words, not with her gestures. I was 24, restless, my thoughts darting from one want to another like a moth against glass. She, Elena, sat in the corner of the cafe where we first met, her back perfectly straight, stirring her coffee without even looking at it. I couldn't explain why I noticed her before anyone else. Maybe it was the silence around her. Not the absence of sound, but the way she made the noise of the room dim. I'd gone there to study. That's the excuse I kept repeating. Notebook open, pen in hand, not a single word written. Just her reflection caught in the glass of the window, her fingers circling the spoon along the rim of the cup, slow enough to make me lose count of time. When our eyes met the first time, I almost looked away. Almost. But she didn't flinch. She just regarded me, like she was deciding something quietly. And then, after what couldn't have been more than 3 seconds, she shifted her gaze back to her coffee. A dismissal, or maybe a warning. I should have gone back to my notes. I didn't. Later that week, it was raining hard, and the cafe was packed. I took the last empty seat, which happened to be at her table. "Anyone sitting here?" I asked, already halfway into the chair. She glanced up at me. A pause, slightly too long. Then, with a voice that didn't rise above the sound of rain but still cut straight through it, she said, "If you can sit without talking." I laughed, though it wasn't a joke. She didn't smile. I don't think she wanted to. But she didn't send me away either. For 20 minutes we sat like that. Her with her coffee, me pretending to read, though every page blurred into nothing. The silence pressed in so hard I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to say something, anything, but the way her fingers tapped lightly against the porcelain cup made me hesitate. It was a rhythm that demanded stillness. And then, right when I thought I'd explode from holding it in, she looked at me, head tilted slightly, and said, "Be a good boy. Don't fidget." I froze. My leg had been bouncing under the table. I hadn't realized. She had. The corner of her mouth lifted, not quite a smile, not quite a smirk. Just enough to make me forget the air in my lungs. From that moment, something lodged itself under my skin. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense. It was sharper, quieter, more dangerous. I found myself scanning the cafe window on my way home every evening, just to see if she was inside. Sometimes she was. Sometimes she wasn't. Either way, I couldn't stop checking. She didn't invite conversation. She didn't soften her edges. She didn't act like she even wanted me there. But every so often, she'd catch me staring too long. And instead of looking away, she'd hold my gaze, steady, unreadable, until I was the one who dropped mine. It felt less like rejection, more like instruction. And that was when I knew, sooner or later, I was going to break every rule she set. It started happening more often after that. I'd walk into the cafe, pretending I was there for the coffee, and she'd already be seated. Same spot by the window, same posture, same careful distance from the world. We didn't always talk. Sometimes she nodded, letting me take the chair across from her. Sometimes she didn't acknowledge me at all. I told myself I didn't mind, but the truth was, her silence made me want her attention even more. Her name came out one evening when the barista greeted her. "Elena, the usual?" And I pretended not to hear it, though it replayed in my head for hours afterward. Elena. The name felt like it had weight. Like it belonged to someone who'd lived more lives than I could count. I didn't know much about her then. Only fragments she let slip. She wore no ring. She carried a leather-bound planner instead of a phone. Her clothes weren't flashy, dark blouses, tailored pants. But the way she carried herself made them look sharper than anything I'd ever owned. One night, I caught her watching me write in my notebook. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly, then asked, "You write letters, or is that a diary?" I laughed nervously. "Notes. Stories. Nothing serious." She hummed, her gaze drifting back to her coffee. "Boys your age don't usually bother with pen and paper anymore." That word again. Boy. It should have stung, but it didn't. Or maybe it did in a way that hooked deeper than praise ever could. A week later, she let me walk her out when the cafe closed early. Rain had left the air damp, the streetlights glowing against wet pavement. We walked side by side, the silence stretching, broken only when she asked if I lived nearby. "Not far," I said. Then, before I could stop myself, "What about you?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Far enough." The words should have ended the conversation. But then her hand brushed against my arm, light as air, almost accidental. Except it didn't feel accidental. The touch lingered a fraction too long, her fingers grazing before pulling away. I didn't breathe until she withdrew. Over the following weeks, our rhythms shifted. I found myself watching for the small things, how her hand paused a second longer on mine when she passed me a cup, how she leaned in slightly when she corrected my French pronunciation from a book I'd been pretending to study. Her breath brushed my cheek as she said the word, slow, deliberate, before she pulled back. I tried not to react. I told myself not to read into it. But my body betrayed me, my throat drying, my pulse quickening, my pen stalling mid-sentence whenever she was close enough to notice. It wasn't just the attraction. It was the gap between us. She had lines near her eyes that deepened when she frowned, proof of years I hadn't lived. She spoke about books I hadn't read, music I hadn't heard. Once, when I asked about a scar near her wrist, she said simply, "Not all stories need telling," and shifted the subject. I, on the other hand, was all eagerness and inexperience, fumbling to seem older than I was. I worried she saw straight through it. That was the risk, wasn't it? Not just the years between us, or the sideways glances people might give if they saw us together. It was the imbalance. She was composed, deliberate, unreadable. I was restless, obvious, too easy to decipher. Still, I couldn't stop. One evening, after she corrected my pronunciation again, she let her hand rest on the back of my shoulder. Not a fleeting brush this time. A pause. Warmth seeping through my shirt. "Better," she murmured. I turned my head slightly, close enough to see the faint line of her jaw, the way her lips pressed together, as if she were holding back more words. Neither of us moved for several seconds. The cafe was nearly empty, the hum of the espresso machine the only sound. My pulse hammered so loud I was sure she could hear it. Then, slowly, she withdrew her hand. But her eyes stayed on mine, steady, unblinking. Something passed between us in that silence. Not spoken, not defined, but undeniable. And for the first time, I realized, she wasn't just letting me orbit her. She was letting me in. It happened on a Thursday night, one of those evenings when the cafe was nearly empty and time felt like it belonged only to us. Elena was reading, her glasses perched low on her nose, and I was pretending to study while really tracing the slope of her wrist with my eyes. "Your pages are still blank," she said without looking up. I laughed quietly. "Maybe I'm waiting for inspiration." Her lips curved, faint, almost indulgent. Dangerous thing, waiting. The air between us thickened after that. She shifted closer, sliding my notebook toward her, her shoulder brushing mine as she leaned over to glance at what I had scribbled in the margins. "You write too heavy for your age," she murmured. Her breath warmed my skin. I swallowed hard, my pen slipping from my grip. The sound of it hitting the table felt louder than it should have. And that was when the bell over the cafe door rang. "Hey, man!" A voice broke through, the familiar drawl of a classmate. Daniel, backpack slung carelessly, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. His gaze flicked briefly to Elena, then back at me. Something unreadable passed over his face. Didn't know you studied here, he said, already moving toward our table. My throat went dry. I caught Elena's eyes, steady, unreadable, though the faintest tightening around her mouth gave her away. Sometimes, I muttered. My voice cracked on the word. Daniel glanced at the empty chair beside us, about to pull it out. But Elena spoke first, her tone cool, polite, but final. This table's occupied. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Daniel blinked, then gave me a look I couldn't interpret, half smirk, half suspicion. All right. Catch you later. When he left, the bell jingling behind him, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Elena didn't look at me. She just picked up her cup, taking a slow sip. Her hand was steady, but I noticed her nails digging lightly against the porcelain. That night, when we left, the air outside was colder than usual. The street was quiet, wet leaves sticking to the pavement. I walked beside her, close enough that our hands brushed once, twice, before she shifted slightly away. People notice things, she said suddenly, her voice low, firm. I know, I admitted. But I don't care. She stopped walking. I turned to face her. The glow from the streetlight carved shadows across her face, softened the lines around her eyes. You should care, she said. The words were sharp, but her voice wasn't. It trembled barely. I stepped closer, just enough that I could feel the heat radiating from her body. Why? Because of what they'll think. Because of the years between us? Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. Her silence was louder than an answer. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. My hand twitched at my side, aching to close the distance, to touch her. For one suspended moment, it felt inevitable, that we'd cross the line, that our mouths would meet, that everything unspoken would finally break open. Her breath caught. I felt it, close against my lips. And then, just as quickly, she turned her head, stepping back. The space between us filled with cool air again. Neither of us spoke for several steps. My chest burned with words I didn't know how to say. She kept her eyes forward, her arms folded tightly, as if holding herself together. But as we reached the corner where we'd part ways, she hesitated. Her hand brushed mine again, not accidental this time. A lingering touch, warm, deliberate, before slipping away. We didn't look at each other. We didn't need to. The charge between us was stronger than anything spoken. And though she resisted, I knew we were already too close to step back. It was late. Too late for the cafe, too late for excuses. We'd walked longer than usual, past shuttered storefronts and the hum of streetlights. The night was quiet, stretched thin, the air heavy with things unsaid. Elena's steps slowed as we reached a narrow alley that cut between two rows of buildings. She paused, her hand brushing the wall as if to steady herself. You should go home, she said softly, though her body didn't move away from mine. I stopped too. Do you really want me to? Her silence lingered. She pressed her lips together, her eyes catching mine under the dim glow of the lamp above. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Not composed. Not untouchable. Just human. Something inside me snapped. All these weeks, I blurted, my voice rougher than I meant. You act like it's nothing, like I'm just some boy with a notebook. But you know it's not that. You feel it too. Her breath hitched. She looked away quickly, as if the bricks of the alley were suddenly fascinating. Elena, I whispered, stepping closer. Say it. Her jaw tightened. You don't know what you're asking. I shook my head. I do. I know exactly. For a moment neither of us moved. The sound of my heartbeat filled the silence, drumming against the fragile stillness. Then, almost reluctantly, she turned to face me again. Her hand rose, hesitant, trembling slightly, as she pushed a strand of damp hair off my forehead. The gesture was small, simple, but it set fire to my chest. Her fingers lingered too long. Elena! My voice was low, nearly a plea. She let her hand drop, but not before it brushed the side of my face, warm against my skin. You don't understand, she murmured. I've built walls. Years of them. You. She broke off, biting her lip. You make me forget why I put them there. I stepped in closer, so close her shoulder brushed mine. The scent of her perfume, subtle, warm, laced with something I couldn't name, wrapped around me. Then forget, I whispered. Just for tonight. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then darted away. Don't, she warned. The word was firm, but her body betrayed her, her chest rising sharply, her fingers twitching at her side as though resisting the urge to reach for me again. I leaned just enough to feel her breath against my cheek, the heat of her presence pulling me in. Tell me to stop, I said. And I will. Her lips parted. A shaky breath escaped. But no words came. The world shrank to the inches between us. My hand hovered near hers, aching to close the gap. Her gaze locked with mine, unblinking, raw. Elena! I breathed, my voice low at her ear. Her body trembled, so faint only I could feel it. Then, finally, her hand moved. She pressed her palm lightly against my chest, not pushing me away, not pulling me closer. Just there. Her eyes shimmered in the dim light, conflicted, fierce, afraid. And then she whispered the words that shattered everything we'd been pretending. If you cross this line, you can't go back. The night held its breath. My lips hovered a breath away from hers. Her hand stayed on my chest, caught between resistance and surrender. And in that suspended second I knew, we were already past the point of return. Her words hung between us. If you cross this line, you can't go back. I was about to answer when her phone buzzed. The sound startled both of us, sharp in the heavy silence. She stiffened, pulling it from her coat pocket. Her hand trembled as she looked at the screen. Just for a second, her face softened, something close to dread flickering across her eyes, before she turned the screen down on her palm. You should go, she said, voice tight now. It's late. I caught her wrist before she could step past me. Not hard, not demanding, just enough to stop her. Who was it? I asked. Her eyes narrowed. That's not your concern. It is if it makes you look like that. I shot back. She pulled free, but not before my thumb grazed the pulse racing beneath her skin. We walked the rest of the block in silence. At the corner, she stopped again, folding her arms as though she could shield herself. I told you before, she said quietly. Not all stories need telling. Her words should have ended it. But then, almost like she was daring me, she added, But you won't stop until you know, will you? I stepped closer. Try me. Her laugh was short, humorless. You think this is just about you being younger? About gossip? She leaned against the lamppost, the shadows cutting across her face. Her voice dropped, raw now, unguarded. I was married. For 17 years. Do you know what 17 years feels like? It's quiet. You stop hearing yourself. You stop being seen. Her eyes flicked up to mine, burning. And now here you are, staring at me like I'm something I'm not allowed to be anymore. The confession cracked something open in the air between us. I didn't know what to say. My chest ached, my mouth dry. She turned, brushing past me as if to end the night, but the way her shoulder grazed mine, deliberate or not, left me dizzy. Elena! Don't, she said sharply, though her steps slowed. I followed, close enough to feel the warmth trailing off her body. You think I don't know what I'm doing? That this is some game to me? She spun around so suddenly I almost collided with her. You're 24, she hissed, her face inches from mine. You have no idea what it means to want someone you shouldn't. To need them and know you'll ruin them if you touch them. Her words hit like a blow. But the way she said need, her lips trembling, her hand clutching the strap of her bag like it was the only thing anchoring her, betrayed her. I couldn't stop myself. I lifted my hand, brushing the hair gently back from her face. Her breath stuttered. She didn't move away. You're not ruining me, I whispered. You're the only thing that makes me feel alive. Her eyes fluttered shut for a second, just one. When they opened, they glistened, raw with something between anger and desire. She shoved me back lightly, her palms against my chest. But she didn't let go. Her hand stayed there, trembling, the space between us thin as a sheet of paper. Then her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't answer. She just whispered, almost to herself. "He still calls." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Her ex. The truth clicked sharp in my chest. "Elena." I started, but she shook her head, as if to shut me out. Her hands pressed harder against me, though not to push me away. More like she was holding herself back. "You should hate me," she whispered. "You should walk away before I drag you into the mess I swore I'd never repeat." But her body betrayed her again. Her fingers curled into my shirt, clutching, pulling me just slightly closer instead of letting go. The night pressed tighter around us, thick with the mix of fear and hunger either of us could disguise anymore. Her confession had raised the stakes. This wasn't only about an age gap, or whispers in a cafe. It was about the ruins she carried with her, the life she'd left but couldn't escape. And yet, her hands were still on me. My face was still inches from hers. Her voice cracked as she whispered the words that sealed everything. "I don't know how much longer I can pretend I don't want this." Her words, "I don't know how much longer I can pretend I don't want this," hung in the air, shaking something loose inside me. I didn't move at first. I was afraid if I reached for her, she'd vanish, fold back into the composed woman who always stayed just beyond my grasp. But she didn't. She stood there, hands still clutching my shirt, breathing uneven, eyes locked on mine as if daring me to cross the last impossible distance. "Elena," I whispered, her name breaking in my throat. Her lips parted, but no words came. Just the faintest sound of her breath catching. I leaned closer, slow, hesitant, so close I could see the fine lines etched near her eyes, the way her lashes trembled. Her forehead brushed mine. The smallest touch, but it felt like the ground shifted beneath us. "This is wrong," she murmured, but her voice was weak, collapsing under the weight of everything unsaid. "Then stop me," I said, barely more than a whisper. She didn't. Her hand slid upward, fingers grazing my collar, pausing just below my throat. The touch was tentative, trembling, yet grounding me in place. "God help me," she breathed. "I can't." And in that moment, the line we'd spent weeks circling broke. Her mouth met mine, soft at first, almost uncertain, then sharper, needier, as though she'd been holding it back for too long. The kiss wasn't smooth. It was messy, desperate, her breath quickening against me, mine stumbling to keep up. Every wall she had built seemed to collapse in that single exchange. Her fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer. I pressed my palm against the curve of her waist, feeling her tremble, not from weakness but from the release of years of restraint. It wasn't just desire, it was recognition. Two people who had been orbiting in silence finally colliding. When we broke apart, she pressed her forehead to mine, her chest heaving. This can't be simple," she said, her voice ragged. "It was never simple," I whispered back. "But it's real." Her eyes searched mine, as if she wanted to argue but couldn't. Instead, she let out a breath that sounded almost like surrender. "You'll regret this," she said, but her hand stayed on my face, her thumb brushing my jaw with a tenderness that betrayed the words. "Maybe," I admitted. "But not tonight." The street was silent around us, a world reduced to the space of our breaths. She leaned into me, just enough that I could feel her weight, her trust, her fear, all tangled together. For the first time, she wasn't guarded. She wasn't untouchable. She was Elena, flawed, vulnerable, fiercely alive. And for the first time, she let me see all of it. We didn't speak as we walked the last stretch together. Our hands brushed, then finally, quietly, intertwined. It was a choice. Messy, reckless, certain to complicate everything. But it was a choice made fully, not in hesitation, not in fear. At the corner where we'd part, she turned to me, eyes glistening in the faint light. "Whatever comes after this," she said softly. "No pretending anymore." I nodded, my chest aching, but steady. "No pretending," I echoed. The next day, the world looked different. Not brighter, not easier, just sharper, as if every detail carried weight. The hum of traffic, the smell of coffee, the rhythm of footsteps on wet pavement. But what stayed with me most was the feel of her hand in mine from the night before. When I walked into the cafe that evening, I wasn't sure how it would go. Would she retreat into that silence again, act as though nothing had happened? Or worse, would she tell me it had been a mistake? She was already there, of course, at her usual spot by the window. Same straight posture, same calm presence. But when her eyes lifted to meet mine, something different flickered through them. A softness. I slid into the seat across from her. For a moment neither of us spoke. The tension was still there, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was steady, grounded, like something we could finally stand on. "You came back," she said quietly. "I was afraid you wouldn't want me to." Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but close enough. "If I didn't, I would have chosen a different cafe." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. We talked then, not about the kiss, not about the risk, but about smaller things. Her favorite books. The way she takes her coffee too strong for most people. How I used to scribble stories in notebooks when I was a kid, just to feel less invisible. The words spilled easier than I expected, and she listened, really listened. When she finally spoke, it wasn't guarded. "I wasn't lying about the walls," she said, stirring her coffee. "But last night, you broke through more than I wanted you to. More than I thought anyone could." I reached across the table, letting my fingers brush hers. She didn't pull away this time. She turned her hand slightly, letting our palms meet, her thumb resting lightly against mine. "Then let's stop pretending we don't want this," I said. Her silence stretched for a beat. Then she gave the smallest nod. When we left together, the evening air was cool, laced with the scent of rain. She walked close enough that our shoulders touched, and after a moment, I slipped my hand into hers. No hesitation this time. She squeezed lightly, steady, as if answering a question I hadn't dared to ask. At her corner, where we usually parted, she didn't step away. Instead, she turned, facing me fully. "Do you know what you're doing?" she asked softly. Not condescending, not doubtful, just honest. "No," I admitted. "But I know what I want." Her expression shifted, tender and unguarded. She reached up, brushing her fingers through my hair before resting her palm against my cheek. The touch was warm, grounding. Then she leaned in, pressing her forehead gently to mine. Not rushed. Not desperate. Just close enough that the whole world narrowed to her breath mingling with mine. "I want this too," she whispered. We stood there for a long time, not needing more words. Just her hand in mine, her head resting against me, the quiet promise of something real, even if imperfect, even if uncertain. The fears, the doubts, the years between us, they didn't vanish. But in that moment they didn't matter. Because she was here. With me. And we weren't pretending anymore.